If you look at the landscape of American fashion in the mid-2000s, one logo utterly dominated the retail market: a massive gold double T medallion stamped onto the toe of a ballet flat. Tory Burch built a billion-dollar corporate empire by selling an Upper East Side aesthetic directly to the American middle class. But in the luxury sector, overexposure is a death sentence. By the early 2000s, the brand was actively drowning in outlet mall discounts and fighting a ruthless corporate civil war against a literal copycat competitor. The industry assumed the company was dead. Yet today, Tory Burch commands critical acclaim at New York Fashion Week, selling structured, unbranded leather bags to the global elite. To fundamentally understand how Tory Burch engineered one of the greatest retail comebacks of the 21st century, we have to look closely at the single piece of footwear that launched her empire and nearly destroyed it. The origin of the corporate empire began as a literal kitchen table startup. In 2004, Tory Burch and her then-husband, wealthy venture capitalist Chris Burch, officially launched the brand directly from their Manhattan apartment. Tory correctly identified a massive, unexploited gap in the retail market structure. High-fashion European luxury houses were far too expensive for the average consumer, while basic mall brands lacked high-end prestige. Tory successfully engineered a completely new category known as accessible luxury. By anchoring the precise price point around $200, she heavily targeted the aspiring middle class, strategically selling a highly curated preppy bohemian lifestyle. The brand experienced a massive macroeconomic explosion in April 2005. Oprah Winfrey explicitly featured Tory Burch on her daytime television show, publicly anointing her as the next big thing in fashion. The logistical impact of this highly coveted endorsement was catastrophic and immediate. The sudden influx of web traffic completely crashed the Tory Burch e-commerce servers. Total inventory sold out nationwide, and the young company hit $17 million in gross revenue almost overnight. But the true corporate catalyst arrived in 2006, the Riva Ballet Flat. The physical design was inherently simple, utilizing a basic elastic-backed flat, but it was aggressively branded with the heavy hardware double T logo secured tightly on the toe box. It immediately became the required, ubiquitous uniform for working women across America, generating unprecedented cash flow for the burgeoning enterprise and firmly establishing retail dominance. The Riva Flat turned Tory Burch into a household name and drove the company toward a billion-dollar valuation. But the astronomical success of this single item triggered a bitter, multi-million-dollar corporate civil war fueled by the one person she thought she could trust. To understand the unprecedented corporate true crime aspect of this specific story, we must intimately examine the exact timeline of the divorce. Tory and Chris Burch officially dissolved their marriage in 2006, yet they initially maintained a highly complex financial relationship, remaining corporate co-chairs of the multi-million-dollar board to oversee their rapidly expanding business. This uneasy alliance shattered entirely in 2011, when Chris Burch aggressively launched a brand new retail entity called C Wonder. C Wonder was not merely a new competitor. It was an exact, highly deliberate corporate clone designed to manipulate the market. The sheer, unprecedented audacity of the operation was staggering. Chris Burch deliberately hired former Tory Burch corporate employees to run his new business. He boldly opened a massive, sprawling flagship retail store directly in Soho, New York City. The aesthetic overlap was entirely undeniable. C Wonder actively sold preppy bohemian clothing, brightly colored seasonal cardigans, and highly specific ballet flats featuring prominent circular gold medallions resting on the toe box. The flagship store featured lacquered green doors, mirrored walls, and geometrically patterned carpets, the exact, heavily guarded visual architecture of Tory Burch retail boutiques. The singular, devastating economic difference? C Wonder products consistently cost exactly half the price, directly threatening her profit margins. This blatant aesthetic sabotage triggered an absolute legal bloodbath. In October 2012, Chris Burch actually fired the first shot, formally suing Tory in the prestigious Delaware Chancery Court for allegedly blocking the lucrative sale of his company shares. But Tory ruthlessly fired back. Just 1 month later, she formally unleashed a massive, devastating legal counterclaim, explicitly suing Chris for severe breach of fiduciary duty and corporate trade secret theft. Her high-powered legal team forcefully accused him of maliciously using his privileged seat on her board of directors to gain unrestricted access to highly proprietary overseas supplier lists, confidential manufacturing data, and exact wholesale pricing margins. They successfully argued before the presiding judge that he systematically utilized this stolen corporate intelligence to build a massive knockoff brand that directly and intentionally cannibalized her retail market share. The high-stakes lawsuit was eventually settled quietly out of court, allowing Tory to force Chris off the board and reclaim total control of her name. But the distraction of the legal bloodbath left the brand completely exposed to a fatal retail disease that kills luxury companies overnight. While the executives were fiercely battling in the Delaware courts, a massive macroeconomic shift occurred in the early 2000s. To actively maintain the exponential revenue growth demanded by shareholders, the company began relying far too heavily on department store wholesale accounts, shipping massive volumes of physical inventory directly to massive retailers like Macy's and Nordstrom, and aggressively expanding their physical presence inside massive factory outlet malls. Instead of maintaining their strict boutique prestige, they aggressively manufactured cheaper, inferior versions of their items directly for the outlets, intentionally flooding the American market with highly identifiable logo-heavy merchandise that immediately destroyed their upper-class appeal. This aggressive expansion strategy caused absolute psychological destruction to the brand's perceived exclusivity. Consumers rapidly realized the physical inventory was heavily overproduced, and they completely stopped buying their primary handbags at full retail price, simply waiting for the inevitable seasonal markdowns to occur. The iconic double T logo, once an exclusive, highly coveted symbol of elite Upper East Side wealth, rapidly mutated into a glaring symbol of heavy, perpetual discounts and suburban clearance racks. This specific economic phenomenon is defined as logo fatigue. The global fashion market aggressively shifted towards stark minimalism. Women completely lost the desire to act as unpaid walking billboards for a corporate brand that was now universally accessible to absolutely everyone. In the ruthless hierarchy of the fashion press, the brand was critically downgraded. They were abruptly grouped into the exact same struggling, severely oversaturated accessible luxury category as Michael Kors and Coach, collectively suffering from the absolute, unrecoverable death spiral of brand dilution. Retail financial analysts openly speculated that the company simply could not survive the damage. The double T logo became a symbol of early 2010s outlet mall saturation, forcing the executive team to execute a ruthless, high-risk aesthetic purge to save the company from permanent irrelevance. Recognizing the fatal trajectory of the company, Tory Burch fundamentally restructured the entire corporate hierarchy in the late 2000s. She formally stepped down as the chief executive officer, deliberately handing the incredibly complex global business operations directly to Pierre-Yves Roussel, a highly experienced former executive from the massive LVMH luxury conglomerate, who also happened to be her new husband, adding an incredible layer of personal and corporate power dynamics that perfectly contrasted her disastrous first marriage. This strategic maneuver allowed Tory to focus 100% of her time and energy strictly on product design. Together, they executed a ruthless, uncompromising aesthetic purge across the entire corporate structure. Their new retail strategy was highly aggressive. They systematically began pulling massive amounts of physical inventory completely out of discounted department stores, deliberately sacrificing tens of millions of dollars in short-term wholesale revenue to forcefully rebuild long-term brand scarcity. Furthermore, they heavily reduced their historic reliance on utilizing massive hardware logos across their footwear and accessories, completely abandoning the flashy aesthetic that originally built the brand. The absolute turning point for the company was the highly anticipated release of the Lee Radziwill collection. This specific handbag physically changed the entire trajectory of the brand. Let us examine the physical engineering. It featured a highly structured, rigid, top-handle calfskin silhouette that demanded incredibly precise manufacturing tolerances from specialized leather artisans. It incorporated highly complex, functional metal lock and key hardware mechanisms that were visually reminiscent of the elite Hermès Kelly bag, but it was strategically priced at $700 instead of $12,000, immediately undercutting the European market. The true brilliance of the design was its absolute restraint. The exterior of the bag featured absolutely zero visible corporate branding. It was a masterpiece of pure architectural construction. Highly cynical fashion critics and prominent magazine editors who had previously ignored or openly mocked the brand for over a decade were absolutely forced to publicly admit that the bags easily rivaled elite European luxury houses in both structural construction and immaculate edge finishing. By stripping away the loud logos and focusing on architectural leather construction, the brand completely rewired its public perception. But creating a beautiful handbag isn't enough to secure modern luxury dominance. They had to win over the most ruthless, cynical demographic on the internet, a brand new generation of extremely discerning young buyers who now entirely dictate modern retail trends. In the modern TikTok era, Gen Z consumers and prominent digital influencers rapidly discovered these unbranded, elevated leather pieces. By emphasizing sustainability, minimalism, and structural quality over cheap logo exposure, the brand achieved massive viral status organically without relying on aggressive outlet discount codes. The survival of Tory Burch is an absolute masterclass in corporate resilience. She built a billion-dollar empire on a single ballet flat, fought off a hostile copycat brand built by her own ex-husband, and survived the financial death spiral of the American outlet mall. By abandoning cheap logos and betting everything on genuine architectural leather construction, Tory Burch proved that true luxury isn't about screaming for attention. It's about building something structurally strong enough to stand quietly on its own. Do you prefer the classic logo-heavy Tory Burch designs or the modern, unbranded, quiet luxury leather collections? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.